So, Final Fantasy has a lot of games.
Which one should you start with?
Hi, I'm Luke.
And I'm Jake.
Welcome to Pixel Talk. Final Fantasy, the ever-expanding JRPG series from Square Enix, formerly Squaresoft.
There's a new one coming out September 30th.
Final Fantasy XV, it looks incredible. From the footage we've seen, I think we're going to have a grand old time with it.
Yeah, I think so too. There's definitely going to be a lot of riding of chocobos.
Indeed, there is.
Yes.
There has been so much riding chocobos. You can Tokyo drift your chocobos, but that's not the point.
Little did you know, chocobos weren't in the first Final Fantasy. They didn't appear until Final Fantasy II.
He knows his stuff.
Yeah. So, because I know my stuff, I would like to talk about maybe the fact that you could be new to the Final Fantasy series. Maybe you think, oh man, Final Fantasy 15 is coming out. Do I have to play all the other 14 Final Fantasy games? And the answer is no. You don't have to play all the other 14 Final Fantasy games. You don't even have to play one of them. But if you do want to start before the game comes out, well, that's what I'm here for.
So, yeah, because there's just so many games. You got so many main series games. You have 2 MMOs. You have all these spin-offs like Crystal Chronicles, World of Final Fantasy.
Yeah, that's coming out soon too. I'm excited.
And you got mobile games.
Mobius Final Fantasy just came out. There's Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, Final Fantasy Record Keeper. So many. Which one do you start with? Well, I would like to recommend that you start with a main series Final Fantasy game, but then you're still limited to a grand old 14 choices.
So Jake.
Yeah.
So you've played pretty much every Final Fantasy game in the main series.
I have.
Yes, in fact, the first time I met you was at DePaul.
Yes.
We went to college at DePaul.
We did.
And the first thing I've seen from you, you were playing Final Fantasy 13. I knew you as the Final Fantasy guy.
Yeah.
There was like this quiz game event going on at
the
our
Jeopardy
college.
game at our college. Yeah.
And you answered every single Final Fantasy question.
Yeah. I was very I was very honored to be part of the team because we got all the Final Fantasy questions. And now, starting up new. Well, I mean, you started the series. You're a novice. Luke.
I've only beaten one Final Fantasy game and only played really about maybe 3 or 4. So I still consider myself pretty novice to this series. So let me ask you, as a novice, asking a seasoned veteran, like which one would I start with?
Well, that really depends on what kind of gamer you are. Because every Final Fantasy game is different. They definitely try to innovate their systems a little bit every time. They change up, what the game is themed around. So, first of all, if you like more like the faster action-paced games, or you want something a little bit more seamless, or if you're used to, Western-style RPGs like The Witcher 3, for instance, or something like that, then I would actually, and this is the only instance I would recommend this game, despite it being my favorite, Final Fantasy XII is a good one to go if you only know Western RPGs, because it is almost a Western RPG in and of itself. And it's
definitely
very open world.
It definitely has that Western art style. It just definitely reminds me of
totally
games of that sort. It has like an MMO combat system. It has this ever-expanding open world.
So that's one instance, but
and the remake's coming out.
It's coming out. Oh, it's so good. This Chocobo just got a little bit happy.
So
but
let's go to as far as accessibility goes. Which Final Fantasy do you believe would be the most accessible to a new audience? So I want to guess, and Final Fantasy X. I want to go to Final Fantasy X.
I can agree. I think it is the most accessible.
Because graphically, it still hold up even with the remake. It has the first one with the voice acting. I feel like as far as accessibility goes, that would be a good one to start with.
It's also out. Yes, I do agree. It's also out on Steam, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, PlayStation Vita. So you don't need a PlayStation 2 to play it. All you need is either a console or a decent computer, and you can play Final Fantasy X with your choice of audio, and it looks great. There's voice acting. It's a turn-based Final Fantasy game, completely turn-based, but it does sort of throw a wrench into the system by having this special kind of turn-based where you can determine the turn order yourself, and that's where the strategy comes in, is like sort of figuring out how many actions you can do before the boss's turn, things like that, using the sphere grid. It's a very straightforward Final Fantasy game. There's there's a leveling system that's a little bit more open, but the story is pretty linear for the most part. So you don't really have to worry about being too lost, and yet it's also not linear to the point of Final Fantasy 13 either.
So you're playing Final Fantasy X, and as you're playing it, you're saying to yourself, "Okay, I get Final Fantasy. This is Final Fantasy to me."
Mm-hmm.
Now, you would think, why wouldn't I start at the first game or the first 1, 2, and 3?
Well, I mean, it's the same reason you wouldn't start at the original Legend of Zelda. Or maybe you would want to try out Pokemon X and Y before you tried out Pokemon, Yellow or Pokemon Red or Blue. And it's just, the idea that, it's a more up-to-date version. Final Fantasy I is very, very old school. There isn't much of a story to it. You're just, the four Warriors of Light, no Chocobos, and all you have to do is, go around, getting the 4 crystals, fighting the fiends, and saving the world, resolving the time loop, and that's Final Fantasy 1 in a nutshell. And it's fun, it's very hard, and you don't really know what to do, there's no direction, and that's why I think the fact that there's no direction in Final Fantasy 1 is why it's not a good one to start with. I would totally start with 10 if you know nothing about JRPGs and you're more in it for the story, but I would like to give a close second recommendation to Final Fantasy 9. And I would even recommend Final Fantasy IX higher if you're more into the classic sort of feel and look. If you like, more classic games like Final Fantasies 1 through 6, Final Fantasy IX is 3D, but it definitely has that. It has that aesthetic of calling back to the ages that have gone by. And
Final Fantasy IX is the Final Fantasy game that I've beaten first, actually.
Mm-hmm. It's fantastic.
I played through 10, haven't really beaten it, but that was so long ago. I plan to get back to it, actually. Mm-hmm. But Final Fantasy IX, it takes everything you know about the classic Final Fantasy series, and then it brings it to a modern day. It has incredible, compelling characters, amazing story, and even it holds up very well graphically too, especially with the remaster, even more so.
Yeah. And most importantly, it's very, very accessible to new players, and the fact that there are no complex systems. It is, a basic RPG with basic leveling up. There's no sphere grid, there's no Crystarium, there's no license board. It's just, you get experience, you level up, you learn new skills. It's very, it's very simple, very, very defined as a classic RPG, and I think it kind of plays to its strengths quite a bit, because if it did have any of those more complicated systems, then it would get to the point where it's like almost too much to think about, and you really just kind of start to ignore it.
But even as simple as it is, it still adds its own little Final Fantasy throwing that wrench in there. As you were saying before, it has the weapon system where you as you use a weapon, you get its skill, and you eventually inherit that over use. In fact, one of my favorite RPGs, Tales of Vesperia, stole that system.
Yeah, they did.
Nothing wrong with that.
No.
True artists steal. Always remember that.
Yep.
As an artist, I'm an artist. You should
steal.
You should take that away.
Always steal.
Always steal.
Yes.
Okay. Now, shifting the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's very off. We're kind of leaving out the elephant in the room. Which is the first Final Fantasy you think of when you think Final Fantasy? What is the first one that comes to mind? Most people would say 7.
Final Fantasy 2. I meant 7, yeah. Unless you're talking about Final Fantasy 4, because that's a pretty well-known one back in the day. But once 7 came out, that was the Final Fantasy to play.
But even people who have never played a Final Fantasy game, they know Final Fantasy 7. They know
totally.
They know Cloud. They know Tifa. They mainly maybe from watching Advent Children playing Kingdom Hearts. But
now we got the remake coming out soon. People are gonna know them all over again with that many more pixels. So it's gonna be pretty interesting.
So
I think.
Would you recommend starting with that one? If.
All right. I want to say, if you can get past the way the graphics look now, because they've dated very poorly, and you're cool with Lego characters, then yes, it's a great one to start with. There is also excellent direction, just like Final Fantasy IX. Excellent pacing. The skill system works very, very well. It's very simple, very effective, very intuitive. And so I think if you can get past the way that the game looks, and also that circle is confirm and X is cancel, then yes, you will totally enjoy Final Fantasy VII and get a lot out of it. However, if you're looking to play another Final Fantasy game, I would recommend like an older one. If you want to play an older one, then play Final Fantasies 4 or 6, depending on what sort of style you're into. If you like medieval stuff, go with 4, totally.
Oh, yeah.
If you're more into steampunk, then you would probably want to go to 6. And, they're very equal. Like, lots of people love to say that Final Fantasy VI is the best one in the series, and I think it's probably one of the best. But in my own opinion, I think 4 and 6 are on par. I think they're as good as each other. Yeah,
because you also have to consider, like, what kind of game you want. If you want, like, very classic medieval Final Fantasy, you would
go with 4.
You'd go with 4, maybe even 6.
6 is more like steampunk. It's sort of
no,
like
not 6. Sorry, 9.
9. Yes, 9 totally.
But like, if you want a more like modern, science-y Final Fantasy, maybe you go with 6, 7, 13 even.
13, yeah. 13 is interesting. It's also like it's one that I don't really mention to new players because it's kind of controversial. It is, I think, a decent one to try out if it's on sale. You should try it out, but don't let yourself think that that's all of what Final Fantasy is, because 13 is very good at giving you little hints and tastes of what Final Fantasy is about. It's kind of like a guided tour, but it doesn't really get into the meat and bones of some of the in-depth Final Fantasy traits until like the second half of the game. And that's why some people get a little bit turned off by 13, and that's why it was so controversial.
Yeah, the thing is, each Final Fantasy game kind of has its own fan base. There are people who genuinely love Final Fantasy 13, and that's their favorite Final Fantasy game.
Yeah, it's not my favorite, but I do genuinely like Final Fantasy 13. I accept all its flaws. It does have flaws. I accept them, I embrace them, because there are things that I also like about that game, and the bad does not erase the good, nor the good the bad.
Don't play Lightning Returns.
Don't play Lightning Returns. That bad is forever bad.
Indeed. What about Final Fantasy VIII?
So, everyone knows Final Fantasy VIII because, like Squall. Leon from Kingdom Hearts. He was originally named Squall. There's a lot of really popular characters from that game. I would recommend that being one of the last you play, however, because it is, while it has a very crazy and out there story that makes it pretty enjoyable, in my opinion, and it's got the card game, the junction system that comes with that game is complicated even to me sometimes. And I love that game. I've beaten that game several times, but it is definitely one that's not friendly to new players. It's very much like, whoa.
Because I think that's kind of another Final Fantasy game that pops into a lot of people's heads
when they think Final Fantasy.
Because maybe to the anime, DeviantArt, Kingdom Hearts crowd, to them only 3 Final Fantasy games exist, 7, 8, and 10.
Yep, and maybe 13 sometimes.
Maybe.
Whenever, there's always good lightning art. But, yeah, totally. It's like the Nomura-based games, the one that Nomura's designed the characters for, are the ones that look the most anime. And there's a reason why those are really popular, is because it's, it's in demand. That's why Final Fantasy 15 is also being made with that similar art style. And that's why I think it's going to be at least a financial success, because Nomura's art will always sell.
And definitely the hype surrounding it.
The hype is there. We got a movie. We have an anime. Also, I should mention, if you are kind of like overwhelmed by everything that Final Fantasy can offer and you just want to wait until Final Fantasy 15, I think that's a perfectly good idea. You know why? There's an anime. You can watch 3 episodes right now, probably 4 soon, and the movie is coming out at the end of this month. So there's so much to get started with Final Fantasy. The movie Kingsglaive Final Fantasy 15 is meant to be watched before you even play the game. So it'll be a great introduction into, the more fantasy, modern kind of setting and world that it's trying to set up for you. And then you can just, try out 15 when it comes out, and you can let that be your first experience. But if you would like to go and try out other games before it, those are the ones I would recommend.
So I think the point we're concluding to is there's not really one Final Fantasy game that you definitely should start with. The real question is,
what's the perfect one for you to start with?
So do you like the medieval setting, or do you like the modern sci-fi setting? Or are you more in the, classic typical RPGs,
or do you like open world? So it all comes down to that. And then I don't want to not address the MMOs. if you have MMO experience, like if you've played World of Warcraft, go try out Final Fantasy XIV. Totally. It takes a lot of inspirational cues from World of Warcraft. So if you've played that game and you know how it works, then it'll be a breeze getting into Final Fantasy XIV. If you're more into, the old style MMOs, then 11 is a good one to go to. Although not as many people play it, it still has a very active, close-knit, small community that they chill on the FF11 Reddit. And
even I, as a Final Fantasy newbie, can really recommend Final Fantasy XIV.
Yeah,
it may not have, to some people, it might not have that main series kind of feel to it.
Mm-hmm. At least not right away.
But it's a genuinely good MMO on its own, and even like I've heard so many WoW veterans say that this is the most matched I felt in an MMO since vanilla World of Warcraft.
Yeah, and that's really like an honor. I never would want Final Fantasy XIV to outdo World of Warcraft in that sense, because I support all MMOs. I want them all to succeed. But the fact that 14 can bring about that sense of magic that vanilla World of Warcraft instilled in players is really something that I'm proud to be. I'm proud to be supporting. So totally go check that game out as well. It's only like $15 to $20 on Steam.
Indeed.
Yep.
So that wraps it up for this week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So thank you for watching our little discussion about
which one to start with, which Final Fantasy.
Yes. So follow us on Twitter here. We'll put that right here. Thank you for like, comment, and subscribing.
Mm-hmm.
We have some new stuff already out.
Yep, totally.
We got a new Let's Play series going up.
Yep.
Keep Talking Nobody Explodes with our good friend Joel Villages.
Yep. It'll be good.
It'll
watch
be
it.
Good. You should. I would agree to that.
Yes.
And until then, see you next week.
Goodbye.
So, Mr. Chocobo, what is it like to be a Chocobo? Do you feel oppressed?
Mark.
Do you feel oppressed in this world of Final Fantasy?
I feel like everybody just wants to ride me.
Well, they do. I hate to break it to you, but they do. They do want to ride you.
Wow. It's nice to be ridden by so many characters.
What do you think about the hit single, So You Think You Can Ride This Chocobo?
I think it represents my inner interests. Because they don't know if they can ride this chocobo. And then I give them the ride of their dreams.
Well, there you have it.
Quit.